Hi folks, this is Jay. Hope you're okay. Today we're looking at Steven Pinker's book, The Blank Slate. He is Professor of Psychology and Director of the Center of Cognitive Neuroscience. And I just want to talk about the book, tell you what I think of it, and tell you my reactions to the book. First of all, the basic thesis of the book is, I think, he's attacking John Locke, and the history of the thinking from John Locke, that the brain is a blank slate, that being a blank slate, we can program it in the way that we want in order to get the behavior that we want. And so from John Locke right up to modern times, where you have the behaviorists who believe that, human nature can be, and the social Darwinianist, human nature can be tampered with. We can program it with the right information to get the right behavior. And I think Steven Pinker believes and is disgusted with this kind of attitude. With his studies of neuroscience and the way the brain works, his argument is that that the brain does have mechanisms, that it's not a blank slate, that it does have processes, it does have ways of doing things, and we need to take these into consideration. And this idea that the brain is a blank slate is just totally wrong. And so he takes that process, that argument that the brain does have certain ways of is not a blank slate, but does have ways of thinking, ways of doing things, and each brain is individual in its mechanism. And he takes this importance of the individuality of the brain, the general ideas of the way the brain works, and works them out in art, in politics, in every other area of discussion. He also, while he's attacking the blank slate philosophy that's permeated the social sciences and sciences in the way we understand human nature and philosophy, while he's taking that on, he also takes on Descartes, where Descartes would say there is a body and a soul, a mind and a soul. And so he attacks that. He attacks social Darwinianism, he attacks postmodernism, and he also attacks the behaviorist and the social Darwinist. He does this in a very enjoyable way. He's constantly interacting with a variety of disciplines. So you can be talking about neuroscience, psychology, sociology, the arts, philosophy. So he's constantly intermingling these top disciplines and topics, which makes for a fascinating and interesting read. He also interacts with novelists and poets, and so you get a very kind of rich cultural mishmash of dialectic within his writing, which makes it a very interesting and fascinating read. However, for those who are more well read and culturally astute, one feels that it is banal. And that's what I feel, that for all the sophisticated interlocking dialectic of dialoguing, the dialogical aspect of the disciplines that he works with, it is banal. And I'm going to share why that is banal in the next couple of videos. So I want to just talk about this book now in critique. Now, I have to be fair that even though I'm going to give a critique of this book, it in no way does justice to this book. You need to read it for yourself, and then you need to read people who will critique the book to get a fair understanding of the strengths and weaknesses. I'm just giving you my philosophical take on the book. I believe that it is a banal book, even though it's a very interesting book. It's also banal. It's interesting because of the sophisticated interplay of disciplines, and but it's banal because the key questions that he tries to tackle, he doesn't really actually answer. So, for example, he takes on postmodernism, and he says to the postmodernists, well, how can you how can you be for oppression, but you are a relativist, but you need absolutist understanding of truth in order to stand up against oppression? So you're contradicting yourself. But the question is, where does Pinker get objective truth from? If he's getting it from the mind, how is that objective truth? Just because you know about neuroscience and the way the brain works, does not make philosophically objective truth. So he's not solved that problem, how you get objective truth. He talks about freedom of the will, but he didn't solve the issue of freedom of the will. He just says most philosophers believe that we have freedom of the will, so we have freedom of the will. Well, that's not an argument. That doesn't do justice to the doctrine of the freedom of the will, how we have freedom of the will. And it's not consistent, it's not logical with his own position. If you have evolved and you believe in evolution, then we are part of matter, and if we're part of matter, then everything that we do is affected by matter, so we don't have freedom of the will, and that is the logical consistency of your position. Now, at the molecular level, on the quantum level, we don't know how the neurons are working from a quantum perspective. But that does not mean that your position as an evolutionist, that you've got out of your problem. What it means is you can't fully understand the causation of the brain, but logically speaking, within your worldview, causal connection is where it's at. In other words, you are affected, everything you do, by matter. Now, there are atheists, there are naturalists who are quasi-mystical and try to get out of it, but that would be a negation of their position, because that would be subjective. So they're welcome to that subjectivity, but they're not being consistent with their own position. That if all there is nature, then your brain is a product of nature, and you do not have free will. So Steven Pinker did not solve the riddle of the freedom of the will with his neuroscience, as far as I'm concerned. The third issue with the book is he's attacking the social sciences and attacking social Darwinianism for its social control, but it's only changing one totalitarian regime with another, because what he's doing is he's saying, look, the answer to these issues is primarily a study of the brain, and he does use the social sciences and information, and if it critiques his position, he accepts that, but generally he's using an understanding of the brain and neuroscience to apply to all the various disciplines like art, politics, etc. And to me, it still seems that it is controlling. You got one sophisticated thinker on neuroscience telling everybody else how they should think and what they should do, and yet his own position is he's trying to, in his own way, trying to set people free from the control of the social Darwinianists and the blank slate activist. But he's not setting them free, he's only giving them another straitjacket. The fourth thing is everything that Christians have been saying about evolution and the dangers that it affects in the in society have been vindicated and verified by Steven Pinker, because he is admitting the weaknesses and the flaws of this Darwinian mechanism evolution being applied to society and social issues. Like I said, this in no way covers everything in the book. He covers a wide variety, and he covers it in depth. But it's banal because he's not actually dealing with the big philosophical and social issues that he thinks he's dealing with. He's just flipping it around with his understanding of cognitive studies and then trying to apply that, but he's fallen into the same traps of those he accuses. He doesn't solve how we get objectivity in logic. He doesn't solve how we get objectivity in knowledge. He doesn't solve how we get objectivity in morality. He doesn't solve these big philosophical problems and ethical problems. Those are my thoughts.